Good evening. Today I am going to tell you about the powers and functions of the Prime Minister of India. You all know that the Prime Minister of India enjoys such powers and functions as the powers and functions enjoyed by the Prime Minister of Great Britain. And India was under the British rule for almost 190 years. Naturally, in India there is a Westminster style of governance has been introduced, and Indian Prime Minister, whosoever he or she may be, enjoys tremendous power, and his functions are also enormous, though the Constitution of India tells very little about his powers and functions. To be more precisely, we can say that there is nothing mentioned in the Constitution of India regarding the powers and functions of the Prime Minister of India. Right. So, in England, the Prime Minister is the keystone of the cabinet arch. Here in India also, the Prime Minister is the key person or the keystone of the cabinet arch. Right. In fact, the position of the Prime Minister has been described by Lord Morley as primus inter pares, that is, first among equals. Prime Minister is maybe equivalent to all other ministers, but he is the first among equals, as has been told by Lord Morley. So, in theory, all ministers or members of the cabinet have an equal position, all being advisors of the crown in the case of United Kingdom, and all being responsible to Parliament in the same manner. Nevertheless, has a preeminence by convention and usage, just like in England. In India too, Article 74(1) of the Constitution expressly states that the Prime Minister shall be at the head of the Council of Ministers. Almost all the powers enjoyed by the British Prime Minister through the conventions are in as much in general applicable to the Indian Prime Minister as well. So, before going to tell you about the powers and functions and who appoints the Prime Minister, how the Prime Minister is appointed, and what are the salary and perks and security arrangements of the Prime Minister, I will like to tell you about the Constitution of India, where it has been mentioned. So, the students of political science are well aware that Constitution is our highest law of the land is the Constitution of India. In the Constitution of India, Part 5, from Article 52 to 151, it says about the Union. I am telling in brief about Part 5 of the Constitution. In Part 5, there are 5 sections, right, 5 chapters. First chapter deals with executive, Article 52 to 78. Chapter 2 talks about Parliament, Article 79 to 122. Chapter 3 delineates the legislative power of the President, Article 123. Part 4 says about the Union Judiciary, Article 124 to 147, whereas Part 5 highlights the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, Article 148 to Article 151. Interestingly, in the Constitution of India, in Article 74, Council of Ministers are mentioned. Council of Ministers to aid and advise the President. It is the heading mentioned in the Constitution. There in Article 74(1), it says, quote, "There shall be a Council of Ministers with the Prime Minister at the head to aid and advise the President, who shall, in the exercise of his functions, act in accordance with such advice, provided that the President may require the Council of Ministers to reconsider such advice, each generally or otherwise, and the President shall act in accordance with the advice tendered after such reconsideration." unquote. Article 74(2) says that the question whether any, and if so what, the advice was tendered by ministers to the President shall not be inquired into any court. Article 75 says about the provisions as to ministers. Here is also, there is no particular mention of the Prime Minister specifically. It is in Article 75, it is said about the provisions as to the ministers, right. Article 75(1) says, quote, the Prime Minister shall be appointed by the President and the other ministers shall be appointed by the President on the advice of the Prime Minister. Article 75(1)(a) says the total number of ministers, including the Prime Minister, in the Council of Ministers shall not exceed 15% of the total number of members of the House of the People. Now, we would like to look into the 18th Lok Sabha. What is the size of the Council of Ministers? You will find that the Union Council of Ministers (COM), headed by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, was shown on June 9, 2024. The present Council of Ministers consists of the Prime Minister, 30 cabinet ministers, 5 ministers of state and independent charges, and 36 ministers of state, right. So, in total number of ministers are 71. This means that at present there are 13.07% ministers in the 18th Lok Sabha. The Constitution of India allows for a maximum of 550 members in the House. So, with 530 members representing the states and 20 representing the union territories. So, at present the Lok Sabha has 543 seats filled by elected representatives. Okay. Article 75(2) says that the ministers shall hold office during the pleasure of the President. But actually the President has little to do with the Prime Ministers remaining in office. Actually, so long within 5 years the head of a coalition or a single majority party remains office when they can prove their majority in Parliament. Number 2. Number 3, the Council of Ministers 75(3). The Council of Ministers shall be collectively responsible to the House of the People, right. Number 4, before a minister enters upon his office, the President shall administer to him the oaths of office and secrecy according to the forms set out for the purpose in the 3rd schedule. Article 75(5) talks about a minister who for any period of 6 consecutive months is not a member of either House of Parliament shall at the expiration of that period cease to be a minister. Many times we have seen that a minister is appointed though he or she has not come as an elected member in the Lok Sabha elections. So, he or she may come from Rajya Sabha ticket, and if he or she becomes a minister, and he or she will have to be a member within 6 months, maybe a member of Parliament, maybe a member of Lok Sabha or from Rajya Sabha, right. Article 75(6) says that the salaries and allowances of the ministers shall be such as Parliament may from time to time by law determine, and until Parliament so determines shall be as specified in the 2nd schedule. So, many people are anxious, or many people are willing to know what is the salary and perks of the present Prime Minister, right. So, you all know that Prime Minister Narendra Modi took office for the 3rd term on June 9, 2024. So President Draupadi Murmu administered the oath of secrecy and office to Modi and 30 cabinet ministers. He took the oath in the name of God, and Modi became the only second Prime Minister after Jawaharlal Nehru to secure a third consecutive term. So salary of Narendra Modi, do you know how much does he get? His salary is only 1.66 lakh. It means 1,66,000 rupees only per month he receives as salary. So this includes a parliamentary allowance of rupees 45,000, an expense allowance of rupees 3,000, a daily allowance of rupees 2,000, and a basic pay of rupees only 50,000, which is sometime lesser than an assistant teacher of a government high school in West Bengal after maybe 20 years of his service. Okay, so and housing. One of the biggest perks Narendra Modi gets as a Prime Minister is his housing. So the Prime Minister of India resides at 7 local landmark in New Delhi, which is one of the best locations in the national capital. This accommodation has no rent or housing cost. This is a free accommodation. And security. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is entitled to Special Protection Group Security, a unit that is solely dedicated to protect him. SPG officers are ingrained in high leadership qualities, professionalism, and knowledge of proximate security. SPG officers are trained to officer, or if necessary, the supreme sacrifice to ensure that the sacred task assigned to the organization by the government is fulfilled at all costs. In the Indian context, do you know who are called the VVIPs? Only a few persons in India are VVIPs. Though there are many VIPs, but very few are VVIPs. VVIPs are the Prime Minister, the President and Vice President, and visiting heads of state. These are the VVIs in India. Okay. So the Prime Minister of India, receives exclusive plane and other benefits. The Prime Minister also enjoys the perk of having Air India One, an exclusive aircraft for his professional visits. Prime Minister is often seen boarding and deboarding these aircraft when he visits other countries. Operated by the Indian Air Force, the Air India INE planes have self-protection suits and full-fledged office space with conference cabins. Let me tell in detail about the security arrangements of the Prime Minister of India. Whosoever will be the Prime Minister of India is entitled to have these kind of security arrangements, because India is a very vast country. India is the world's largest democracy, and not only that, it is the world's 5th largest economy. So Indian Prime Minister is entitled to world's best category of security arrangements. Actually, SPG system was not earlier after the assassination of Indira Gandhi in 1984. In 1985, SPG was created, a special protection group was created, right? So the SPG is armed with a wide range of weapons and technology for protecting the Prime Minister of India. Apart from armed units, they also operate in plain clothes to perform intelligence gathering and, if necessary, to assist the police in anti-riot operations. The main surveillance system used by the SPG and the Delhi police to monitor the movements of Prime Minister is the video tracking system. It is installed in all vehicles used by the Prime Minister to travel. These vehicles are closely monitored and recorded throughout their journey, and whenever necessary, travels are marked with a beacon. When a vehicle is stopped for a traffic offence, all the movement records over a particular period, such as distance covered, time spent, and traffic violations, are analyzed for later investigations. It is also used to monitor people's movements in the vicinity of a prime ministerial aircraft. The Security Bureau of SPG contains specialized units such as the Anti-Terrorist Squad, Investigation Wing, and Vehicle Research and Development Wing, which are tasked with handling VIPs' travel needs, such as providing arrangements for airport security. Physical security arrangements for the Prime Minister. What type of physical security arrangements are there for the Prime Minister of India? Many are curious to know, particularly the students. For them, I am just giving a brief analysis of the physical security arrangements for the Prime Minister of India. A special security cell monitors all physical security arrangements for the Prime Minister and their family members. Though the Prime Minister Narendra Modi does not have family in that sense, he lives alone. The cell reports directly to the Home Ministry and is headed by IPS officer posted at the rank of Additional Director General. The Central PSG and thereafter the SPG was established in 1985, headed by an IPS officer of the rank of DGP. The SPG headquarters is based at South Block, New Delhi, and has a strength of about 500 personnel drawn from Central Police Forces. These includes officers from the Indian Police Service (IPS), Deputy Superintendents of Police, and inspectors from all India Police Services. The SPG is divided into several branches, including operations, establishment, and technical. SPG inspectors are dressed in civilian clothes and carry pistols, usually the Glock 17. The deputy SPG commandants are assigned the task of bodyguards for the Prime Minister and are provided with a 9mm Parabellum pistol and a Browning high-power pistol. The commandants of various sectors protecting the Prime Minister, New Delhi, Lucknow, Raebareli, and Chandigarh, are assigned for 4 inspectors or deputy commandants to assist them. A special protection group or SPG officer is assigned to accompany the Prime Minister to all important engagements inside and outside of India. The SPG is standard equipment with Mitsubishi Outlander and Nissan petrol vehicles. The vehicles are equipped with high definition cameras, GPS systems, and advanced communication equipment. The SPG vehicles are also fitted with obstacle sensing software, which recognizes when they are blocked by trees or other objects on the road. The SPG also maintains a fleet of helicopters for transportation purposes. The larger MI-17 usually carries 2 SPG personnel, whereas the smaller Bell 412 does not carry anyone during transportation. Now we will discuss the powers and functions of the Prime Minister of India. The benefits and perks and salary enjoyed by the Prime Minister I told. Now I will tell you in brief about the powers and functions of the Prime Minister of India. The powers of advising the President as regards the appointment of the other ministers has been mentioned in Article 75(1). As to the function of acting as the channel of communication between the President and the Council of Ministers, Article 78 provides, it shall be the duty of the Prime Minister to communicate to the President all decisions of the affairs of the Union and proposals for legislation. The written provisions of our Constitution in this regard are extremely sketchy. They do not cover the area of entire authority that the Prime Minister has to exercise. Moreover, like in England, our Prime Minister is expected to play the role of efficient executive in view of the paramount fact that the President constitutes the dignified part of the Union executive. It should also be borne in mind that there are four important factors that either circumscribe the authority of the Prime Minister or force him to push back the barriers in order to play the role of a greater national leader. These are written constitution, federal system, judicial review and multi-party system. Let me directly come to the powers and functions of the Prime Minister that can be studied under four main heads. Number one, in relation to the Council of Ministers. The Prime Minister enjoys powers as the head of the Union Council of Ministers. The Prime Minister is appointed by the President, and thereafter all the ministers are appointed by the President on the aid and advice of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister actually prepares a list of ministers, and on the basis of the list of ministers, the President does only the formalities of swearing in ceremony. So, the Prime Minister recommends persons who can be appointed as ministers by the President. So, he is the key person who decides who will be given what portfolio. Next, the President can appoint only those persons as ministers who were recommended by the Prime Minister. Though it is said that the Prime Minister will appoint the President will appoint the ministers, but the President does so on the advice of the Prime Minister. Then the Prime Minister allocates and reshuffles various portfolios among the ministers. It is the Prime Minister who forms his team of ministers who will take ahead his dream. Next, he can ask a minister to resign or advise the President to dismiss him in case of difference of opinion. So, if there is any difference of opinion between a minister and the Prime Minister, that particular minister has to resign, or he may be dismissed by the President on the advice of the Prime Minister. He presides over the meetings of Council of Ministers and influences its decisions. Prime Minister being the head of the ministers, he presides over the meetings of all the meetings of the Council of Ministers. Next, he guides, directs, controls and coordinates the activities of all ministers. He can bring about collapse of the Council of Ministers by resigning from office. Once he resigns, entire ministry resigns. Entire ministry falls actually. So, since the Prime Minister stands at the head of the Council of Ministers, the other ministers cannot function when the Prime Minister resigns or dies. In other words, the resignation or death of an incumbent Prime Minister automatically dissolves the Council of Ministers and thereby generates a vacuum. The resignation or death of any other minister, on the other hand, merely creates a vacancy which the Prime Minister may or may not like to fill. This is the difference between the Prime Minister and other ministers. Number 2, in relation to the President, the Prime Minister enjoys a lot of power in relation to the President. Number 1, he is the principal channel of communication between the President and the Council of Ministers. It is the duty of the Prime Minister to, number 1, communicate to the President all decisions of the Council of Ministers relating to the administration of the affairs of the Union and proposals for legislation. Number 2, to furnish such information relating to the administration of the affairs of the Union and proposals for legislation as the President may call for. And number 3, if the President so requires, to submit for the consideration of the Council of Ministers any matter on which a decision has been taken by a minister but which has not been considered by the Council. Then he advises the President with regard to the appointment of important officials like Attorney General of India, Comptroller and Auditor General of India, Chairman and members of the Union Public Service Commission, Election Commissioners, Chairman and members of the Finance Commission, and so on. Next, number 3, in relation to Parliament. The Prime Minister is the leader of the lower house. In this capacity, he enjoys the maximum powers, a great number of powers or major powers enjoyed by the Prime Minister. He advises the President with regard to the summoning and proroguing of the session of the Parliament, when the Parliament will be called, when the Parliament will be dissolved, are advised by the Prime Minister to the President. Next, he can commend dissolution of the Lok Sabha to President at any time he announces the government policies on the floor of the House. Next, number 4, other powers and functions enjoyed by the Prime Minister. In addition to the above 3 major roles, the Prime Minister has various other roles too. He is the Chairman of the Planning Commission, National Development Council, National Integration Council, Interstate Council, and National Water Resources Council. He plays a significant role in shaping the foreign policy of the country. He is the chief spokesperson of the Union government. He is the crisis manager in chief at the political level during emergencies. As a leader of the nation, he meets various sections of people in different states and receives memoranda from them regarding their problems and so on. He is the leader of the party in power. Next, number 6, he is political head of the services. Thus, the Prime Minister plays a very significant and highly crucial role in the political administrative system of the country. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar stated, quote, if any functionary under our constitution is to be compared with the US President, he is the Prime Minister and not the President of the Union. More elaborately, I can say about the powers and functions of the Indian Prime Minister. Actually, he is the linchpin of the government. It is said that he can make any statement on behalf of the government, and it is correctly said that the Prime Minister is central to its ministry's formation, central to its life, and central to its death even. So this is the power of Prime Minister of India. He is the chairman of the Cabinet Committee. So the Prime Minister is the chairman of the Cabinet Committee. He convenes and presides over all the meetings of the Cabinet. He is to fix agenda for such meetings. The ministers are individually responsible to him for the good administration of their respective departments. The Prime Minister may warn, advise, or encourage them in discharge of their functions. He is the head of the Council of Ministers. He acts as the chairman of various standing and ad hoc committees of the Cabinet. He is the chief coordinator of the policies. The Prime Minister is the chief coordinator of the policies of several departments. In case of conflict between two departments, he acts as the mediator. He irons out quarrels among various ministries and departments. He is the sole advisor to the President. The Prime Minister is the sole advisor to the President. The right to advise for dissolution of the Lok Sabha rests with the Prime Minister. The President is expected to accept the advice of the Prime Minister and not that other ministers. The Prime Minister is the only channel of communication between the President and the Cabinet. The Prime Minister is the main channel of communication between the President and the Cabinet. I told you about that just a few minutes ago. Next, I would say that the Prime Minister of India is the leader of the nation. The Prime Minister is the leader of the nation. He is the chief spokesperson of the government policies and parliament. All important policy announcements and are made by him in the parliament. He is the leader of the majority party, and as such he usually becomes the leader of the house. The British convention is that the Prime Minister should belong to the House of Commons. Such a convention is expected to develop in India, whereby the Prime Minister will belong to the Lok Sabha, which is the popular House of India. Normally it happens here in India also. The Prime Ministers are becoming from the Lok Sabha only. He is the leader of parliament. As the leader of majority in the Lok Sabha, the Prime Minister is also the leader of parliament. In this capacity, it is the PM who, in consultation with the Speaker of this Lok Sabha, decides the agenda of the House. The summoning or the proroguing of Parliament is in fact decided by him, and President only acts upon his advice. He is the Director of Foreign Affairs. As the powerful and real head of the government, the Prime Minister always plays a key role in determining India's foreign policy and relations with other countries. At first, in his first swearing-in ceremony, he called for the SAARC countries. Thereafter, in the second swearing-in ceremony, he called the member states of BIMSTEC. So this was his prerogative. His role as the leader of the nation, besides being the leader of the Lok Sabha and party, Prime Minister is also the leader of the nation. He is the face of the country on the basis of his personality, his words, his works, and his actions, his policies. The dignity, prestige, and winning chance of the ruling or the coalition he leads become brighter. That is why people see the face not of the other ministers, rather the Prime Minister, what he says in India, what he does in India, what he speaks, and what are the policies he is taking for the development of the country. All these things are dependent on a good quality leader. India is having a very good leader, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and he is doing very aptly. He has helped India to recover India's lost glory and India's economy, India's defense, transportation system, science, technology, space research. All these things are growing. With all this, we expect that the Prime Minister will do more for the betterment of the people and will try to take India to a $25 trillion economy by 2047. With these, I would like to conclude here. Thank you.